All right, very good morning, everyone. I hope you got some idea from this documentary that what we are trying to learn in proteomics is still, just very small piece of the whole puzzle, which can contribute towards understanding the proteome, right? And there are many technologies which are still emerging in the field of proteomics, starting from the discovery-based approach to validation-based approaches. There are different type of instrumentation, different type of workflows, different softwares. Because the problem itself is very challenging, we have to look at the dynamic proteome, its modifications, its localization, its interactions, which can be highly abundant biomarkers, which can be taken forward for the translation value. A lot of these things are very much big challenge still to understand, and therefore lot of advent of technologies are happening in this particular area. So in the last few lectures, let me share my screen now. We have been discussing about basic concepts of MS-based proteomics. Today I'm going to move to quantitative proteomics. And essentially, first I'll give you the recap of the lectures. I'll then talk to you about quantitative proteomics, why it is important, and what are different type of approaches of doing quantitative proteomics. One could do label-based or label-free methods. Why one is better than other, or one could be chosen over other, will be discussed. You have seen two different type of software analysis, one from Mascot, other from the MaxQuant. Now, these are the tools which are going to take your raw mass spec data file and going to give you some output in terms of the protein list and the abundance values of the intensities of those particular peptide ions. Now, how to take that data forward and compare their quantity and look for their quantitative values. That's where the secondary data analysis becomes very important. And we are going to do that using MetaboAnalyst software. So today we are going to have third exercise, which will be on MetaboAnalyst. You will practice that, and then there will be a quiz based on this particular very interesting, easy to use software. Just to give you a quick recap of the previous lectures, we are discussing about proteomics workflows and predominantly mass spec based proteomics workflow, because idea is that any type of sample when you take, you have to go through series of sample preparation step to the digestion aspect of the project to digest the protein to peptide forms, separate those with the HPLC or nano-LC, ionize those using electrospray ionization or MIDI, then separate those in the mass analyzer. Different type of options are there, and you generate the raw spectra, which you have to then do further search with different databases to find out which are all proteins and peptides present in that given sample. We have also discussed about Orbitrap Fusion, one of the very advanced LC-MS system, which is actually a tribrid mass spectrometer with quadruples, Orbitrap, and ion trap. And in the last class, I also gave you a little bit practical aspect of it, why the sweep cone, ITC, these becomes important to keep them maintained and clean, how to calibrate the instrument. We also showed you a methods like how to open the methods file, how to look at the your LC gradient, as well as different parameters for the mass spectrometer. So all of that I hope is making all of you feel like you are doing experiments yourself and you're comfortable following up how data being generated from the mass spectrometers, right? So in terms of the progress of the lecture so far, we have talked about proteomics introduction chapters. We have looked into the basics of mass spectrometry, some of the key concepts of the mass spec and data analysis, and software like Mascot and MaxQuant were used. Now we are moving on to from protein identification to protein quantification, because so far we talked about how mass spec can be used to get a list of the proteins, which is essentially protein identification. But now we'll talk about how to quantify those proteins, and then different secondary data analysis software like MetaboAnalyst and Perseus could be used. And as we go along in the quantitative proteomics learning, then those could be also contributing towards more biological or clinically oriented information, which should be analyzed within the light of pathways and networks as well, which we will talk as we go along subsequent lectures. I hope you're keeping pace of the quizzes, because we are not going to repeat these things. We are going to do in every class. And I hope the time which is given to you is also sufficient for doing these quizzes and the time for the exercise. So just to also make some of you who may not have seen these things yet, like all the lectures are already recorded, and uploaded in YouTube, which is our Proteomics IT Bombay channel. In this playlist of VB607, you are having these videos. I sometimes add some reference videos as well, which I will also subsequently remove it. Essentially, these are the lectures which you have to follow. And if you click on each of the video, you will see in the video description, I have added the handout, which will be for each lecture, the PDF file of whatever slides I'm sharing or whatever we are going to talk, everything will be there. Also in the previous class, we talked about MaxQuant. So all the data file and the tutorial file, everything of link to MaxQuant was put in this particular Google Drive link. And also there is a resource of Planet Orbiter, which I have given you a link. A lot of interesting information and literature reviews and recent papers, these are all present, which is made updated by Thermo Fisher to update about how to make use of the Orbitrap systems. So you are encouraged to refer to these links and try to get some updated information from that. So I hope so far you are pretty much aware that what all resources you have available for doing this course, and everything so far whatever we have talked in the class is made accessible to all of you. So with this, let me now take and talk about today's topic, which is quantitative proteomics. And first, let me ask you the question that why we should be interested in learning about quantitative proteomics. So anybody want to add and give their perspective, why to do quantitative proteomics? Or why quantitative biology in general is important? What do you think? Please raise hand and we can talk. Yes, Aparna.
We can see like which proteins are in excess in or and lower level in disease states if we are talking particularly about proteins, which might give us an idea about the therapeutics.
All right, I think good answer. Anybody else want to add any more point? Yes, Parth.
So if we talk about quantitative proteomics, it's all about knowing the levels of the proteins in our body. So in case of disease, which proteins are getting upregulated or downregulated. So in that sense, it plays a very important role that we know what amount of proteins are generated or degraded in a particular amount of time.
Very good. Anybody else want to add any more points? Yes, Athira, please go ahead.
How post-transcriptional modifications are affecting the protein, how it is regulating the level of the protein, all those things can also be understood. Hello?
You're audible. Anybody else? All right. Yeah, so I think all of you have covered some very important points. Let me take Piyush comments as well, then we can talk. Piyush, please go ahead. You can unmute yourself, Piyush, and then talk.
It is used in pharmaceutical as well as in diagnostic applications to quantify proteins and metabolites in complex samples.
All right. So I think all of you have given different clues and some points that which is all important. The idea is that quantitative biology in general is important because whenever you want to understand a given system, you want to know that if the things are in the normal state, as soon as there is any change, what type of things get perturbed because of the change. That change could be disease, that change could be environmental stress, that change could be a drug treatment, that change could be in human based on what we are talking right now, or could be in any other life science system for that matter. You are taking a bacterial culture or yeast culture and giving a drug treatment, and you want to know what is actually changing at the proteome level because of the drug induced system, or you are doing a heat treatment or doing other type of drought treatment, any other type of shock, and you want to measure what is changing because of that given stress condition. So in all, you are looking at from the normal condition versus the change condition of the test condition, what the dynamic changes are happening in the inside the life science system, and what kind of signal cascade events which are being triggered because of that. And therefore, if you can understand those changes, then that gives you some clue at least that what is happening in response to that disease or pathogen or drug, and how to try to control that. Because once you know which are the major key players over there or the major culprits over there, then you can try to target those. So therefore, quantitative proteomics becomes very important. And I think one of you, Aditya, probably mentioned about quantitative metabolomics as well, which will be additional thing which can be learned later on. But overall, I think, looking at the fluxes, the changes, the dynamism of these biomolecules, the dynamic molecules becomes very important. And that's where I think learning quantitative proteomics is quite crucial for us to understand any type of life science system. So there could be different ways of looking at quantitative proteomics. And right now what we are talking about, very focused, very narrow, only about one technique, right? And of course, quantitative proteomics can be done using gels as well, 2D gels, dye gels. It can be done using microarrays. It can be done using label-free biosensors. It can be done many methods. But right now we are only talking in the context of mass spectrometry-based quantitative proteomics. And to do the quantification or quantitation of a whole proteome, here we are trying to measure thousands of protein and what all changes are happening in which proteins. So one strategy could be that you take your control sample and disease sample and you label them with different type of tags. So if control samples gets tag X and the disease samples get tag Y, and then if you can recognize those X and Y tags in the mass spec instrument, then that could be used to compare your what is the X by Y ratio coming for each of the peptide and each of the protein, right? So that's in simple way you are trying to look at the ratios of those quantification using the tag which you have introduced artificially from your side, and that tag could be metabolic tag, it could be chemical means, it could be different enzymatic ways, or even adding some synthetic peptide handles, different ways of introducing the tags which are different in your control versus disease condition. But at the same time, you want to make sure also that these tags are having similar behavior, because you don't want to change that control and disease should behave differently because of the tag which you have introduced. So it's quite challenging in that way to get the right tags, right type of labeling strategies, which should not have the major change in your both the condition. At the same time, still you can monitor those changes because of the tags which you have introduced, like X and Y in this example, which I gave you just now. So there could be different ways of looking at quantification. One possibility is to look at the label base, which I just spoke to you. You add some tags or labels, and that's what you are going to follow. In some simple experiment of fluorescent based stuff, I think you are probably aware of using Psi3, Psi5, these type of labels, different type of fluorophores being added, right? But in mass spec, you can't read those fluorophores, so therefore you are using some other type of tags, which can be read in the mass spec instrument. Or else can we also use a label-free approach, which means we are not going to add any tag or label on the protein, but rather we are going to trying to measure the protein properties in its own way and just trying to understand how the protein is changing because of my control versus disease condition without adding any label. Now this part becomes much more tricky because without having a specific tag to monitor, you are looking at some very specific properties of these peptides, looking at the peak intensities or how many spectra of those peptides being observed. Those kind of traits you're going to follow. Whereas label based is slightly more easy to do in terms of the analysis part, because you have added two different type of labels in your your control versus disease conditions, and then you can monitor those easily with the different type of tags. So this is what broadly there could be two strategies. One could be label based quantification of proteins. Second could be label free quantification of proteins. Today I'm going to focus more on the label free part as I go along, but I'm going to give you a brief exposure of label based first so that you understand how quantitative proteomics is being done, and label free is much newer concept, much more emerging concept. So label-based proteomics, actually I'll give you much more detail of the label-based in the next lecture when I'll talk to you about the chemistry of different tags and how they work. But just I'm trying to give you first a broad overview so that you can appreciate how quantitative proteomics is being done. So as we talk, you have two conditions, your healthy versus disease condition, and you want to compare those. You can use different ways of in vitro labeling. So let's say you have extracted the protein from the healthy individual and from disease individual, and now you want to add some tags in the healthy protein as well as in the disease protein. But you are not going to do labeling at the protein level, but rather you are going to look at more at the peptide level labeling. There could be different ways of labeling. In fact, you can look at even amino acid based labeling, or N-terminal peptide based labeling, or C-terminal peptide based labeling. These are different broad strategies which one could follow. Now, when I say amino acid based labeling, one could use isotope coded affinity tag, or visible isotope coded affinity tag, ICAT or VICAT, or mass coded abundance tags, or even the Quest quantitation using enhanced signal tags. You don't have to worry for the names of all of this. And I'm not going to ask any question based on this. Just giving an idea that there are different type of reagents, different type of tagging strategies that are available, which is all looking at a specific amino acid, like can I label lysine, can I label cysteine? And then based on that, I'm going to introduce some changes which can be used for the quantification. But this can be very biased because you have to look into in our whole proteome only though the specific amino acids has to be labeled for each of the protein. Therefore, your labeling efficiencies, your bias for cysteine, many of these things becomes challenging. So idea was, can we come up with more generic approach rather than amino acids? Can we look at N-terminal sequence of peptide or C-terminal sequence of peptide? Because those are more generic strategies. And when we are going digestion, with the trypsin enzyme like this, then we are going to generate those peptide sequences. So this strategy of doing N-terminal peptide-based labeling is very powerful, which is currently heavily used and being the gold standard in the field. One is known as iTrack, which is isobaric tag for relative and absolute quantification. A similar strategy like iTrack is known as TMT or tandem mass tag. Other possibility could be global internal standard technologies, or in the C-terminal peptide labeling, esterification or proteolysis based methods are being used. Now we are going to primarily focus on this part, which is the currently industry buzzwords and the most heavily used method for doing the label based quantitative proteomics. Again, as I said, I'm going to talk to you about what these tags are, what iTrack means, what TMT means, how the labeling being done, and how that can be used in the for your entire experimental workflow in the next class. But I'm giving you just a quick overview for you to appreciate that how these experiments are being done. Now let's say we have 3 healthy individuals and 3 diseased individuals. You have extracted the protein from those 3 healthy and 3 diseased. So now C1, C2, C3 and T1, T2, T3. These are the simple experiment which you want to do. You have now taken this commercial tag, which is tandem mass tag. This tag can be in the 6-plex or 10-plex or 14-plex. There are different type of multiplexing capabilities are there. Now let's say you have taken 6-plex right now from 126 to 131. So these peptides after digestion, these peptides are being labeled with these tags. And now after tagging, each sample gets its unique tags, right? So the sample C1 gets 131, C2 gets 130, C3 gets 129. And what you see here, some difference in the mass. And to balance them out, there's some balancer group which can balance it out. And therefore, you are not going to add any difference in the overall mass of each of these peptide set. Therefore, these are known as isobaric tag. You don't want to change that mass. Otherwise, you're going to see the difference because of the mass change which you have from the tag itself. So this is one of the very promising label-based quantitative proteomics method. After you have done the labeling of each sample separately, then you can pool and mix all of them together. After mixing them, then you are running in the mass spec like this way, the way you have seen previous runs. And after doing MS/MS fragmentation, now you can see these labels are coming there, 126, and all these labels are being shown there, which can be utilized for your quantification, because now you can see like what can be fold change when I look at these labels versus these labels. So this is in general being done. But what is additionally what is also being done in the cell culture models when people are using let's say different type of cell culture based experiment, in vivo labeling becomes very important, and different strategies from the culture derived isotope tags versus 15 nitrogen media or SILAC, all these are being used. SILAC, which is a stable isotope labeling of amino acid in cell culture, is the most interesting and most widely used in vivo labeling method. Again, we are still talking about labels, either in vitro labels or in vivo labels, right? So what is the simple thing to start with for quantitative proteomics? You have 2 set of conditions to be compared. You are labeling one set of condition with one type of labels, other set of condition with other type of label. It could be strategy, could be in vitro labeling, or it could be in vivo labeling. In vitro labeling, essentially iTrack, TMT, iCAD, these kind of methods can be used. In vivo, many things are possible, but SILAC is most heavily used, and that is what we will talk in the subsequent lectures. So this gives you at least some quick overview of label-based quantification, which we will elaborate as we go along. But label-based having some limitations. For example, labels are very costly. Labeling efficiency is very important. Sometimes labeling efficiency is not good because you are introducing a chemical from outside and you want peptide to bind to that chemical. Therefore, your labeling efficiency can be of concern, and not all the time is 100%. So there are different pros and cons of thinking about different workflow of how to do quantitative proteomics. So one concept came, which is known as label-free quantification, known as LFQ, which is essentially how to quantify my two conditions of healthy and disease without introducing any external tag. Can we look at the internal properties of these peptides and try to use that as a surrogate way of quantifying the abundance of these from my healthy versus disease condition? So workflow is very straightforward, like what we spoke for the shotgun proteomics, where you are starting from each sample separately protein extraction, followed by the urea buffer exchange, reduction with DTT, alkylation, idostamide, digestion with trypsin, clean up with the zip trip C18 material, run in the mass spec MS1 or MS2, LC-MS-MS based workflow, and then the data analysis has to happen. So LFQ workflow is like the straightforward shotgun proteomics, which we have been mentioning to you. So label-free quantification idea is that you are not integrating any stable isotopes, right? Which I showed you in the TMT case. So this becomes in many way very bold and very nice idea that you don't have to buy those costly reagents and you don't have to do an external chemical reaction for labeling, and still you are planning to measure all the peptides and proteins and their quantification abundance, right? So that's very interesting concept. Now here what becomes very important is the chromatography part, because idea is that every protein which is composed of peptides, every peptide is very unique in nature with their hydrophobic and hydrophilic compositions. So in the chromatography, when we are eluting out our peptides, which is from the our reverse phase column, slowly the peptides are eluted out, and therefore every peptide based on their unique profile is going to come to a specific retention time. So if you are setting up, let's say, 2 hours of gradient, if let's say at 60-minute type of peptide which is being eluted, you are confident that the same type of peptide will be eluted in my control healthy versus disease condition in both way, because peptide will be still same. It may have some changes or modification, or it may have some abundance which can be seen for that peptide, but the peptide nature should not change, right? So peptide is expected to ionize equally, because when you are doing ionization, the ionization efficiencies of those peptides based on your entire workflow should not change in different type of sample of the same project, like healthy versus disease. If you're looking at same human sample, it should not change, and number of fragmentation event is also going to be similar. So therefore, can we use these information for the quantification of my peptides and eventually the proteins? So there are two possibilities of using this type of interesting concept for the quantification. One is to look at the peak intensities of these peptides, and second is how many spectra we see for these peptides with the spectral counting. So what we are looking at, chromatographic elution of these peptides, which is coming at a specific retention time, and trying to measure their intensity or trying to measure their number of spectra, which is being monitored and which can be used for the quantification as well. So let's talk about each one of these. And so it's very straightforward workflow, because any sample which we are taking now, you are preparing the sample, digesting the sample, and running them individually to acquire their entire spectra from that given sample. And then eventually you are going to use that to compare with other sample. Unlike the label-based quantification, when you had 6 samples, every sample was labeled together, and you were actually pooling all of them together and then running all at once. Here, every sample is being run independently, so there is no cross-contamination. Every sample, in some way, you are creating a specific library and a database for that sample type. So this particular workflow opens up many interesting opportunities as well. It's not only quantitative proteomics which you can do, but you're also generating, that biological sample, a specific database and library for that, because for that sample, every data can be stored separately, and that you can compare that and analyze that in different ways in future as well. So 2 methods, as we said, we are looking at the quantification. So quantification based on the peptide ion intensities. Idea what we talked, healthy versus disease condition. If on a given retention time, my peptides show this level of intensity versus in the disease condition show this level of intensity, can I use this information? Again, as I said, if my chromatography is reproducible, if it comes to the same retention time, if you see the shift and all, there will be a problem, right? But measuring these peak areas intensity and calculating that to look for the changes in abundance from my healthy versus disease could be a way to quantify my every peptide in the given sample type. And this is actually a very important concept which is working well to do the label-free quantitative proteomics, one of the ways of doing this quantification. Other possibility could be that if my healthy versus disease sample is when I'm running in the mass spec, in healthy, let's say this protein was highly abundant like we saw here, it was more abundant versus the disease condition. So it is probably expected that there are number of peptides spectra are more higher in that healthy state as compared to disease, which has reduced the number of peptide overall abundance from that. So the number of spectra which you will count here should be ideally less as compared to more here. And of course, it can be varying depending on the overexpression or depending on the downregulation of the proteins. But what you are looking at the spectral counting based on the number of how many MSMS spectra being generated from that given protein, right? And to measure these fragmentation event, you are going to measure all the peptides which belong to that protein. So you will, of course, have one peptide like this, but then you will count all the peptide which has come from that given protein, how many spectra you have acquired from each of those peptides for that given protein in your condition A versus condition B. When you sum up those, then you are able to come up with how much is the abundance I have, which is higher or lower as compared to my healthy versus disease condition. So two different concepts. One is based on the looking at the quantification of ion intensities. Second is based on the spectral counting can be utilized. So just to sum up what we are discussing right now, essentially different type of workflow being used for doing the quantitative proteomics. Within label-free, there are two possibilities of looking at the intensities versus the number of spectral count. And overall, in terms of quantitative proteomics, you can look at label-free and label-based methods. Now, label-free is very less costly because you are not labeling the peptides. Label-based is very costly because you are going to use the tags and labels. Label-free, every sample is being run individually, whereas in label-based, you are pooling all the conditions and making a pool of that, running them together. Label-free, the study design is very dynamic because you can just run the sample as you get in. You don't have to think a lot of biological questions to start with, because here you are acquiring the entire data from that one sample, and you are creating the patient-specific or sample-specific database and library for all the peptides. Now, eventually, you can analyze that data in different possibilities, different ways, depending on what clinical data you got from those patients, what type of other information you have from those samples. You can keep analyzing that data again and again because data is not pooled, it's all individual. Whereas here, study design has to be thought of beforehand. A question has to be decided beforehand because you are going to pool all the samples and only going to get answer for that specific type of question which you wanted to address. The analysis time is much longer here. It's also very complex and challenging here, whereas its analysis is much more robust because it's very tight type of experiments, and you are going to have those pools to run, so number of overall data size will be small. Here, the flexibility in label-free is if you are especially working on different biological sample or more clinical samples, you can keep adding more number of samples and add whenever you want to run in future as well, and you can reanalyze the whole data with the large number of sample. Today you got 50 sample and maybe in 6 months you got 100 sample. You can reanalyze the data after 6 months and you can now include all the new 50 sample as well. You cannot do that in the label based. You have to have the fixed number of sample until unless you have thought about something much ahead of time and made some internal standard and pool standard, which we will talk in the label based design in the next class. So I hope that you're all very excited that how people have now, scientists have come up with the newer ways where not only one or two peptides and protein, but entire proteome can be visualized in the quantitative nature. So what we are looking at, every single protein from the plasma sample or the tissue sample or a cell lysate or any kind of sample, you're looking at every single peptide and protein. What is their quantification changing because of that biological change which has been introduced in that sample type. So this is very fascinating, and this has really changed the landscape of our outlook for the quantitative biology. How we can understand biology and clinical question has totally changed because of our ability to now look at thousands of protein and their dynamic quantification changes which are happening. So we will be now focusing more onto data analysis aspect in this particular lecture today. And of course, in the course, that's the main focus, as you have understood by now. But these are very interesting ways of thinking about your biological experiment. So today we are going to give you a data file which will have 3 control and 3 treatment, C1, C2, C3 and T1, T2, T3. Now we are talking about quantitative changes. Last time we were talking only about protein identification. Now we are talking about protein quantification. So you will have condition A and condition B. Within that, 3 samples of each type. You will be shown, actually MetaboAnalyst should not be MaxQuant, it should be shown MetaboAnalyst software, which we are going to show you demo. And that is going to be utilized for today's exercise 3. So I hope you are able to appreciate that it's very important to address biological or clinical questions using quantitative proteomics. There are different type of workflows being used for label-based and label-free quantitative proteomics. Label-free quantitation is quite challenging, much more newer and emerging approach. Even there are more advancements happening right now, which is data independent analysis, which is happening as compared to DDA-based approach of LFQ. A lot of new innovations are happening. Idea is to make the process much simpler, much less costly, as well as make it much robust to look at the entire complex proteome at the scale which was never thought of, right? So it's going to be very exciting. What we have planned that one of the TAs of the course and the PhD student from my lab, Mr. Deepru Biswas, is going to give you a short overview of his work, one aspect of his project, which is essentially the brain proteome map, which he and his team has developed. An idea over there is to show you that how using the label-free quantitative proteomics-based approaches, one could try to come up with quantitative aspect of the project as well as build the databases which can be used for many other interesting things to be addressed. So he's going to follow after me shortly, and then we are going to have you the demonstration of MetaboAnalyst software. All right, but before I close, let me take any questions if you have. Please ask me if you have any points to clarify, any question which you want me to address. And then I will hand over to Deep to give you some example, a very short example, to give you an overview of how label-free quantification can be used in the real-life situation of the actual clinical projects. Anyone want to ask me or say something here? Yes, Anjali?
Hello, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Can you hear me? Actually,
Yes.
I had a doubt in label-free quantification. You said about your ionization equality. So I just wanted to ask, like, what was that equality about? Like, how much the peptide is ionizing in both controlled and disease state? Is it should be equal or what? I didn't get that part.
Right. See, ionization, what is happening that, we are, think about an online system of LC-MS/MS, right? That's what we are talking, ESI, LC-MS/MS. So when you are having the peptides which are coming from the chromatography, and then they are getting ionized, and then they are moving to the mass analyzer, right? This is what is happening. Then the next set of peptides are coming. They are also getting, ionized and moving to the mass spec. So each time there are set of peptides being eluted from the column, right? From the chromatography. So idea is that, in the column, which is the C18 material, your peptides are bound. Elution is happening as you are increasing the gradient from 5% to 90% of acetonitrile with formic acid, right? So that's eluting out your peptide. That elution is based on the hydrophilic and hydrophobic compositions of these peptides. Which peptide should elute out based on the increasing gradient of your acetonitrile. So therefore, assumption here is your healthy versus disease condition will have the same peptide, only changes will be the abundance or the number of peptide spectra for that or the intensities of those. So therefore, if at 60 minutes there is a set of peptides that are being eluted out, which are being ionized, they will be same in your sample 1 to sample 10. All the sample, if these are coming from human plasma, for example, all the samples should have the same peptide coming at that specific retention time, irrespective of these are from different individuals or from different type of conditions or different healthy or disease. So that's the assumption, and that's where you are making sure that your chromatography is very reproducible. Otherwise, all these assumptions will fail.
Okay, sir. Okay, yes. Thank you.
All right, so we will quickly move to Deep's short overview presentation, and then we'll talk about MetaboAnalyst demonstration, which will also lead you towards your quiz 3. So requesting Deep to share the screen and take over.
Hello, sir. Hope my screen is visible and I'm
Yes.
audible.
Please go ahead. Make the full screen and go ahead.
Okay. So hello, students. So today I will try to give you an overview that how the label-free quantification can be taken to a next level, and which has helps us to do a proteomic profile of different regions and subregions of human brain, and also their interhemispheric laterally. So before I go into the technical information, let me give you a brief idea that what I'm talking about brain proteome. So this is something we all know that our brain is divided into different regions and sub-regions. For example, very broadly, there is cerebral cortex, midbrain, and cerebellum. And all these different regions have different sub-regions and also other anatomical sub-regions. So we have tried to collaborate with one of our collaborators from Spain, and we have tried to get these regions and sub-regions in protein form from both left and right hemispheres. So as you can see over here, this is the right hemisphere and left hemisphere of the brain. So all these regions, which is almost 19 different regions of anatomical regions of brains and sub-regions of brain has been taken. Then the protein has been isolated, that means the lysate have been prepared from the tissue, and then peptide has been prepared, and then these peptides were shipped to us, and finally we have injected these peptides into mass spectrometry and we got data. So as you can see from each of these regions and from left and right hemisphere, we have acquired almost duplicate runs of this data. So how much data we have generated. And all these things has been done in level 3 quantification, because the reason is that we want to have a differential expression of these anatomical regions, and also we want to go for the next set of values. So over here, the level quantification would have been, first of all, much more costly and exhaustive process. Whereas level 3 quantification is very much easy, where the samples need to be taken. There is no need to go for any labeling of tags, and we can directly inject into the mass spec, and then further the samples can be taken forward. And you guys are well aware now how to take the level 3 data and do analysis in MaxQuant, and then this MaxQuant data further need to be processed. So now how this, when we have run all these samples, we found somewhere around 38,744 peptides, and out of which almost 3,000 plus proteins, which are high confidence proteins we have got. And then we have done a couple of analysis to understand which protein belongs to which chromosome of human, then which of the regions and sub-regions have how much distribution of the proteins, and some important proteins which are known to be a brain marker or brain enriched protein. For example, neurofacin protein, GFAP, then NCDN. These kind of proteins also we have identified, and as you can see, how these proteins, which is known to be a brain enriched proteins, are almost present uniformly in different regions and sub-regions of human brain. So all these informations, what I'm giving right now, are kind of applications and a secondary analysis which you can do from the LFQ data. So now the next part, what we have done is that we have taken all these proteins and we have tried to understand that what is the expressional difference in different regions and sub-regions of human brain. For example, when we have taken one of the protein, which is HPCA, this is the hypocalcin protein. And we found that this particular protein has a very high expression in the basal ganglia. So basal ganglia is a part where which has a multiple subregions like putamen and caudate nucleus and all this. And we found that when we are comparing with the other regions, we found basal ganglia is having a higher expression of the hypocalcin protein. And when we see this in the heat map, we found that hippocampus is also there, which is a known region for hypocalcin protein. So like this, we have also tried to understand the protein level expression even in the different hemisphere. For example, this is cerebral cortex, and this is left hemisphere, this is the right hemisphere, this is left hemisphere, and how the expressional difference of a particular protein could be seen in left and right hemisphere. That also we have tried to understand. As you guys will be knowing, that how a left hemisphere and right hemisphere actually work very differently in a person. And for example, we know that for a left-handed person, the left hemisphere work completely differently, and for mathematics and other kind of functional information, the hemisphere plays a big role, right? So both the hemisphere don't play a same role, even which we can see even in terms of the protein expression. And what more application we found is that we also could see there are proteins which are coming and getting identified only in one or particular sub-regions of a particular anatomical region. For example, this particular 4 region, putamen, lenticular, external, internal, and caudate nucleus belong to basal ganglia. And this particular protein ANKRD63 we found only to be expressed in the basal ganglia, these 4 regions, which is absent in the other regions. So like this, even OMP, which is the olfactory marker protein. So the name itself is suggesting olfactory means smell, right? So this is we found only in the olfactory bulb. However, other regions and sub-regions don't have this particular protein. So this is another application of level 3 quantification where you are able to understand the region specific markers in the brain. And like this, we have found a couple of markers which we have also validated 1 or 2 and got the result that it's itself giving an idea that these are the marker protein for this region. And then this particular data has been taken forward to understand in terms of the biology, for example, different synapse-based gene, and also which of these particular protein which are known as the disease marker are coming in different regions and sub-regions of the brain. So as you can see, this particular heat map is giving an idea that how this particular protein, which is MAPT known for as a disease marker, is giving an expression in different regions and sub-regions of the brain. So this is giving an idea that the expression of a particular protein, even in basal level expression, is not same in different regions and sub-regions of human brain. So this particular thing has given us an idea of going ahead for development of a human brain portal, which has been developed by IIT Bombay from our lab. And students like you from different backgrounds, like different engineering background, help us to develop this particular portal. I will just give you a brief idea and just show up a 1 or 2 protein to give you an idea that how this particular level 3 quantification data is actually we can see in the human brain portal. So this particular portal has been developed by us, and as you can see, I'm just writing a protein name which is actin, which is a very it's a kind of housekeeping protein. And when I'm clicking this particular protein, it will redirect us to another window, which is giving an information of this particular protein in left hemisphere. So as you can see, how this particular protein is showing in different regions and sub-regions of left hemisphere, right hemisphere, and even in the region-wise data, how it is showing. And we have also taken some repository data to validate our claims. And as you can see, it is a protein which is actin is showing almost same uniform expression in different regions and sub-regions. And also in the same way, we have also given the information of the peptides. So if I'm clicking to the peptides, you can see whatever peptides are there, whether it's a unique peptide, not unique peptide, what is the length of the peptide, all the information is available for this particular protein. So as you know that this particular protein is a housekeeping protein, so it will come in all the regions of region. Let's see OMP, which is the olfactory marker protein. Just now I told, and this is the present in olfactory bulb. So as you can see, this particular protein also in left hemisphere, we are finding the expression in olfactory bulb. However, in the right hemisphere also, we are getting into the olfactory bulb, and the region specific data also we are finding in the olfactory bulb. And at the same time, we have also make whatever information could be available for this protein in the link wise, and it can be redirect you if you are clicking this particular link. It will redirect you to some other portals that will give more information about this particular protein. So there are so many information. For example, you can see this particular protein also is available for mouse. In mouse, it's present in olfactory region. So like this, we have so many things available, and all these things is possible because we have generated the level 3 quantification data of these many regions and sub-regions of brain. So like this, right? So I think this is to just give you guys an idea that how powerful the level 3 quantification could be and how it can be taken forward, and we can generate such a big portal. So that's all.
All right, Deepya, thank you. So this one, was a short overview. We thought to give you flavor that this type of level 3 quantification data can be so powerful that you can actually utilize this information in different ways as you go along in the future, because you're running every sample at a given time, and you are storing those peptide information in a database form, and then you can also use this thing for the quantification. Only thing you have to make sure your methods and chromatography and whole experimental setup is quite reproducible. So this is just one illustration. Of course, this is, we will talk more and give you more flavor and examples for disease and different type of other quantitative experiment which we are doing. But right now, let's move on to MetaboAnalyst software, which is very user-friendly, made by Dr. David Wishart and his team from University of Alberta. This software is primarily being used and made for looking at metabolomics data set. By the way, I graduated from U of A and have very good feel of this software that Dr. David Wishart and his team has made. So this software, what we are using it for our advantage of doing the proteomics based analysis, while the original this software is made for the metabolomics. So Deep, now you can share the link here with students, and we can give them a demo for the MetaboAnalyst software. What about the data file? You are first going to show a demo, right?
Yes, sir. We will just give you a short demo.
All right, please go ahead.
Yeah. So what we will do, we will give a demo, and wherever I need, I have to give some information to you guys, I will switch back to PPT. So just to link the last class, whatever we have. So you have seen that we got a input file, something like this, where we have done a lot of processing of the files, as you guys have remembered, that we have done a lot of filtering, lot of processing to get a file which have a list of confident proteins, right? But the thing is that that particular data, whatever we got that time, were having lot of a number of headers, I mean number of columns, which we generally require for understanding the confidence and quality of the data, but we generally will not require for the next part of the analysis, where we will try to analyze, do some statistical analysis and visualize the data. So in the last presentation, in the brain project, we have seen there are so many different kinds of visualization images are there, which includes heat map, which includes volcano plots and other plots. So all these things are from the same data which we have given from the MaxQuant last time. So the first thing from that particular data is to generate a matrix file which can be used for the secondary data analysis or the statistical data analysis. So for that, I will just give you an idea that how the particular file look. So don't worry, we will share with you the file that will have a matrix file only. So you don't need to go for a filtration. But just to give you an idea that this is the file which we have started, which we got last time, and you have solved the quiz based on this only. So from here, we have taken out all the information. Sorry, we have taken out all the information, and finally we have taken this column where the protein names we have taken. So we have used the delimited option to remove the pipes, and we have just taken this particular protein UniProt ID, and we have taken the LFQ intensity. So now I think you guys are familiar with these terms, that what are LFQ intensities and all these things. So these LFQ intensities we have taken, and we have prepared a file something like this, right? So this particular file, which will have the UniProt IDs, and this particular file is have the brain tumor 1, brain tumor 2, and brain tumor 3. That means there are 3 samples from brain tumor, 3 different samples, and which has been written as a tumor subgroup, assigned as a tumor group, and 3 control, which has been assigned as a control group. So this particular matrix we generally called as P cross N matrix. So this P cross N matrix means the P is the features which is present in the columns, and N is the number of samples which are the samples that is present in the rows. So this P cross N matrix is very important for taking this data forward for any kind of analysis. So today we will see the statistical analysis, but this particular format with some normalization and also some kind of scaling also goes for machine learning also. So this particular matrix is pretty uniform, which can be used for any kind of analysis after the level 3 quantification, also level 3 data analysis from MaxQuant. Right now, I will request you guys whether the I think Shashwati has already shared you the exercise file, And I will request you to download this file and try to work with me, so that when the quiz will happen, because the quiz will happen with this particular file only, which has been shared, so that you are aware that what particular data analysis you need to do, and which particular analyzed information will give you the answer of the particular question, right? So for me, I will use a demo file, and for you guys, you can use a that particular exercise 3 file, which has been shared with you. Fine. Okay. So, and when you are opening this file, make sure that the particular file should look something like this. Okay, you might have more number of samples, that is fine, but the matrix should look something like this. Okay, because this is a matrix that you need to prepare for meta-analysis. Right now, I have shared you the link of meta-analysis. If you're clicking into that particular link, you will find something like this, right? So you have to click here to start. So once you are clicking here, you will find an array of different analysis domain which are over here, and out of which today we will only see for the statistical analysis. So just click in the statistical analysis, right? So please try to follow all the steps the way I am telling. Otherwise, it will be difficult for you to analyze the file, and will make some error, and that will not help you to answer the question in the quiz, right? So once this is done, as we know that these are intensity, peak intensities, because the whatever the abundances are based on the mass spec peak intensity. So we will click into the peak intensity table. Then we will click over here, samples in column unpaired. So what is the meaning of this? Samples in column is, if you see this particular data, you will find that all the samples are present in the column, right? So as you see, right? And it is unpaired because the samples has been taken from different individuals. So these 6 samples are from 6 different individuals. It would have been samples in column in paired when a particular individual has given the same, given 2 different samples. For example, we have collected a tumor sample from a particular patient and also an associated control sample from that patient. So that is a kind of a matched sample. And during that time, we should go for a samples in column paired. But as we know that today is a sample, whatever samples we have shown given you is unpaired sample. So we will click over here. Then we will choose the file. So this is an important thing. Once you are getting the file, please go to that particular directory and choose that file. So for you, it will be exercise 3 file. For me, it is demo meta-analysis inputs. So once you are doing this, click into the submit. So once you are clicking into the submit, it will give you a data integrity check. That means how the data is actually looking. So for example, you can see, and I should emphasize in this point that you should check all these points, whatever is coming, very thoroughly. For example, the data is having 2 groups were detected, right? Because we know that one group is brain tumor and the group is control. The next part is that the non-numerical value, there must be some non-numerical value which has been replaced with NA. 191 features have a constant single value. So this could be some missing value or some zero. So even I should show you this. So if this particular data, if we come down, we will see there is a lot of missing values are available. That means for this particular protein, the protein has not been identified in all the samples or in none of the samples. Right? Sorry, it has not been quantified in all the samples or none of the samples, but have been identified. So this is a real problem that we face even in different data sets that we take for machine learning. Even if you are downloading from a data set from a from a grocery index or from a stock market, we will find that there are a lot of missing values are there. That means for some reason that particular data has not been recorded. So we need to handle this missing value with utmost care, so that whatever the missing value has been imputed is not on the basis of some biased imputation, but on the basis of the data that we are getting, right? So over here we are finding there is a total of almost 2290 missing values were detected. Obviously, for your data, for your file, it will be different, but you should look into all this information very thoroughly. Because these are the information that will help you to understand the data. So let me go to my PPT and I will give you some information about the missing value imputation. So missing value imputation has generally been divided into 3 parts: MCAR, MNAR, and MAR. So these are missing at random, missing completely at random, and missing not at random. So as you can understand, missing at random and completely at random is by chance, and it can be imputed based on any algorithm or any kind of strategy which takes the whole data set into account. But missing not at random is something which is a very difficult and very a difficult thing to handle, because there is a reason of missing of these values, which could be that one particular sample while processing has some issues. So an array of data has not been recorded. So for this kind of cases, it is very difficult for anybody to do a missing value imputation, and any missing value imputation for this kind of data will go into bias imputation, which will be reflected into the statistical data analysis. So there are some books are there which you can take forward and can read, that has helped me to understand this kind of thing pretty good, right? So so the next thing is that once you know that there is missing value, obviously the next part is that you have to click into the missing value for imputing these missing values. So once we are clicking into the missing value, we will see that that whatever it is telling is that remove features with too many missing values. So over here, we have always tried to keep this part stringent, and we will remove features with missing value more than 30%. That means we are allowing only those features which has 70% data, and the 30% missing value will be imputed based on the 70% of the data available. And over here, there are multiple missing value options are there. I will request that you can go back and read this. But over here, we are using a KNN feature-wise missing value imputation. That means using a k-nearest neighbor algorithm on the basis of the feature. For a particular feature, we are imputing the sample. But over here, there are sample wise is also there. And why for proteomics data we are not using sample wise? Because if a particular sample is somehow down or have some issues, that particular sample wise imputation of that particular feature will eventually reflect that the sample is bad, and that thing will bias the feature imputation also. So over there, that is the reason we go for feature-wise imputation, so that the other values of the particular feature in different samples will have some role to go for this particular imputation. That will somehow prevent the biasness of the sample to sample variation. So now once this is done, we will go for we'll click into the process. Over here, there is some data filtering criteria. We will not include this because we have done some manual filtering in the MaxQuant. We will just click proceed. You can also click in none and submit and proceed, but it is fine. It will not affect the analysis. Now, the next part is that the normalization. So this is an important part in any kind of big data analysis, where the normalization helps you to prevent the run-to-run variation, because we are running multiple samples. One after another, it might happen that the instrument calibration, the column, and there are so many things that you have seen in the mass spec demonstration would go bad, and that is the reason which might completely deviate the different the run-to-run comparison. So for that, what we do, as you have seen, the data is e to the power 8, e to the power 9. First, we will log transform the data, and we'll click normalize. So for here, we haven't done any normalization. We have just log transform the data, and we will try to see view result in the sample view mode, that how the data is looking. So if you see, this particular data is showing that there is a run-to-run variation, because the central tendencies over here are not aligned. That means if we are taking this data and we are trying to compare brain tumor versus control, the analysis will be very much biased based on the groups that is already there, right? So the first thing we understood that we need to go for the normalization, and that is the reason we will select median. So there are multiple normalizations are there, but for proteomics, generally, as it's a small data set, the median has worked better for most of the analysis. So we will go for a median normalization. We will go for a log transfer, because we want to see the data in the sample in a box plot. And the data scaling part, we are not going at, but obviously you can, if you want to play, you can play with the file that has been given to you. But for this particular quiz, you should follow the kind of parameters that I'm telling you, right? Then we'll click normalize again.
Excuse me, can you settings
view the result?
Missing value and data filter again?
Sorry?
Can you show the settings of missing value and data filter again?
Okay. So please do tell me when I am in that particular state only, because going back and showing it again is little difficult. So as I have told that there is a 30% remove features with greater than 30% missing value we are selecting, and we are using our estimate missing value using like missing value estimation on based on the KNN feature wise, and we are going ahead, we are processing the data. After that, we will not click anything over here. We will click proceed because we are not submitting anything over here. And then we are doing a normalization by median and the log transformation, and we are normalizing the data. So I think you have remembered that before, without normalization, the data was showing not showing pretty good. But once I have normalized the data, you can see after normalization, the data central tendency of all these 6 samples, for your case, it will be 8 samples. Hello. Okay, so for your case, it will be 8 samples, and it will show that the normalization has been done properly, and now your data is ready to go ahead. So that means the normalization has helped you to deal with the runtime variation. So once this part is done, then we will go ahead, we will proceed, and now your data is ready to go for any analysis that we can take it forward. So the first thing we will go for PCA. So principal component analysis, I think most of you will be knowing that it's a clustering based, works on the basis of the clustering algorithm. That means it's a unsupervised strategy where it tries to understand the variation between the two classes based on the major variation that we have found between the two groups. So as you can see over here, we can see the PC1 is 42.7%. So PC1 is the maximum variation of the features that we can see in the data set, then followed by PC2, PC3, PC4, PC5. And if we see the score plot over here, we will see that despite its unsupervised clustering technique, we could see that there is a 2 different clusters we could see, where 3 controls are there, 3 tumors are there. So that means there is a biological variation that we could understand that is already present in the control versus tumor, right? So this is a very important thing to understand whether the groups that we have assigned are actually having some biological variation or not, or the technical or the data-wise variation or not, what we have submitted. Next, we will go for the PLSDA. So PLSDA and PCA are same, which give you the cohort information, but PLSDA works under the principle of linear classification model. That means it works with classification, that is a supervised. So it takes the the information or the class information that we give, right? So now if we see over here, we will also see the same thing, that there is a 3 group, but over here the variation whatever we are saying for the component 1 and component 2 are completely based on the classes that we have assigned, because it's a supervised classification. And this particular PLSDA also helps you to understand the important features. So if we click over here in important feature, which give you the variable importance in projection. So VIP, kind of a VIP score, which gives you an idea based on the component 1 variation, that which are the topmost proteins are coming, which are showing the maximum VIP score. That means the particular protein are having a maximum variation when control and tumor has been taken into account. So for example, you can see this particular VIP score, which is from 3.5 to 4.5 and more. We can see the P61764 is a protein which is giving a control, giving an idea that it is present high in control and tumor, and is one of the important protein that is having the maximum variation when these 2 classes has been taken forward, right? So this is another important part which you should look into it. Then the next thing is fold change. So fold change means when we have taken control and treatment, control and disease into account. So what is the list of proteins that is showing a fold change? For example, we are giving a fold change threshold of 2, and we are giving a tumor versus control. So for your case also, you can give on the basis of that, and we are submitting the data. And so we are finding almost significantly downregulated protein 271. That means these are the 271 proteins which has been found to be downregulated when compared with the tumor versus control, and 234 upregulated. However, 834 protein, which you can show over here, are not are insignificant, having not much fold change when the fold change threshold has been taken 2.2, right? And if we are clicking over here, it will give you an idea in the form of a box plot that how this particular protein is actually looking in terms of the control versus tumor. Now the next thing is we will go for the t-test. So t-test is the statistical test, and there are two tests you can see, two sample t-tests and Wilcoxon rank sum test, right? So this is a very important part where you have to choose the test based on the data you have. For example, generally there are two kind of statistical tests. One is parametric test and is non-parametric test. So over here for the normalized value, because we have a normalized data set, we are using parametric test. And parametric test has mainly two kind of tests, student t-test and Welch t-test. However, the non-parametric test, if we would have done the normalization, then the non-parametric test is would have used, and there are two Wilcoxon rank sum test, and the second one is Mann-Whitney U. So both of the non-parametric tests are same only, but one used for the first one Wilcoxon rank sum test used for the paired data and likely dependent data, and for the other one Mann-Whitney we use for the independent data. But for over here, what we will do, we will choose a group variance unequal, and as you can see, as I have normalized the data, so I will not go for non-parametric test, rather parametric test, and I will click a p-value threshold of 0.05. That I am giving a chance of 5% error in my data, and the raw p-value I will select, and 95% data will be p-value passed, right? So I am selecting, I'm submitting it. So as you can see, there is total 224 proteins are there which has passed this p-value cutoff of 0.05. So now, if you have understood this too, you will see that one analysis give you a fold change, and another analysis give you a p-value significant protein. But still, we haven't understood that which are the proteins which will give you a fold change and also a p-value significant protein with the fold change. So for that, Volcano plot plays a very important role, where you have to give a fold change threshold of 2.0. Tumor versus control, we will take a 0.05 p-value, and the group variance unequal, right? So this should be the the information that should be available. But make sure that for your quiz you read the question thoroughly, because over there the question in the question only in the bracket the informations are available what parameter you have to use, right? And also when we are clicking it submit, so as you can see, the Volcano plot is showing something like this, which is giving you an idea that there are 103 significantly down. But over here, these 103 are having fold change greater than 2, and also a p-value 0.05 criteria cutoff. So over in this particular plot, we are getting both, right? These are significant proteins that is differentially expressed genes. Differentially expressed proteins. So differentially expressed proteins DEP. And you should take a look into the axis. Then you will find the x-axis is the log2 FC, log2 fold change, and the y-axis is the minus log10 p. That means the p-value cutoff which we have is a minus log10 conversion of that particular p-value, right? I think this much is more than enough. Just I will show you another heat map. But I think till Volcano plot, if you have done correctly, it will be enough for you to give answer to your quizzes. And so this is also a kind of information where if you are taking the top 25 protein, we can see that what is these are the samples, proteins. In terms of control versus tumor, you can see how the particular sample is showing differential expression in terms of the two groups. So this is a visualization of the differential expression. Whatever you are getting from the Volcano plot, it is giving an idea in the terms of the heat map. But Volcano plot is very important to understand both the fold change and p-value cutoff criteria, right? I think this much is more than enough, and obviously you can go to downloads, and when you are clicking into the generate report, it will give you the whatever you have done till now. It will give you a complete information of this particular on the base of this particular PDF, that whatever you have done and all the major visualization plot and the tables it will give you in this particular PDF, right? So I think this is the thing that you should learn from the meta-analysis, that how from a data which has no information rather than some values, we have reached to the statistical output and also the visualization plots, right? I think please read the questions carefully and analyze the data once again with the questions so that you give a correct answer, choose the correct answer, and also read all the hint and the parameters that are given in all the questions. It will help you to get to the correct answer, select the correct. Yeah, so that's also from my end.
All right, thanks, Deep. In fact, students, I'm sure you will have some questions, but those may not be linked right now to the quiz. Questions which I think you should be trying to understand better is how a mass spec data being generated, and also why there are some missing value which we see, and also how to overcome those missing values. And I think some of those things will be genuine question which you will have in your mind, which we should actually talk maybe in the next class. Right now, what we are aiming that you should go through this file with the workflow which just now Deep has shown, and you can go through those settings and try to achieve your output and answer the quiz questions based on this MetaAnalyst software output. Main thing is this is very user-friendly, very nice software, and even after the quiz, once you are done, you can explore more features here. You can look at how you can make different figures, different images. All that could be very interesting when you will be given a project eventually in the course as we go along. Then you can utilize some of these softwares, and actually you can build your own data points, your own figures, your own images, which you can use for illustration. So I think that's all right now from our side. Saraswati, please share the link. If any settings, any issue anybody has, please do ask in the chat. We will be happy to give you more guidance on that. But don't ask any specific answer, from the overall how many are significant and those kind of questions. But if any setting problems you have or doubt you have, please do ask us. Even you can ask now, or even you can do that even as you go along in the quiz time as well. Shakti, how much time we are giving? 20 minutes? Yeah, please said that. Let's announce to start. Okay, all right, everyone. So the quiz link is shared, and we are going to give you 20 minutes time. Please reset, Shashwati. Let's give 20 minutes time, and students can do analysis and attempt questions based on that. Okay, all right. Good luck, everyone.